My maid of honor sabotaged every vendor at my wedding, told me my fiancé was cheating, and told him I was leaving so she could swoop in. So, we played along, let her think it was working. Renee has been my best friend since we were 12 years old. When Theo proposed, she was the first person I called, and she cried and hugged me, and I asked her to be my maid of honor without a second thought. Then the wedding planning started, and small things kept going wrong. The caterer had us booked for the wrong date. Half of my guest list got an email saying the ceremony started an hour later than it really did. My seamstress told me a woman had called to cancel my final dress fitting. The florist switched my order to a smaller arrangement after someone phoned in a change of plans. The DJ was told the reception was being cut short. Every single time, Renee was the one who found the problem first and swooped in to fix it, and every single time it left her looking like the hero and me looking like I could not run my own wedding. She also kept reminding the group that she had been there long before Theo, that she knew me better than he ever would, and that she was really the one holding this whole wedding together. Then she started in on Theo. She would wait until we were alone and tell me she had heard some things. She said someone had seen Theo out with another woman. She said she only wanted to protect me. She said maybe I was rushing, that I deserved better, that a real friend would tell me to call the whole thing off before I made the biggest mistake of my life, and that she would stand right beside me if I did. She said it more than once, always with no one else in the room. I told her, you might be right, let me think about it. She looked very satisfied with that, and told me she had already started thinking about what she would say when people asked why the wedding was off. What Renee did not know was that Theo had come to me 2 days before, confused, because she had been texting him behind my back too. She had been telling him that I was having second thoughts, that I was not sure about him, that I had been different lately. She had been checking in on him constantly, and finding reasons to see him without me there. He told me everything she had been saying and asked me what was going on. We sat down and laid all of it out, every problem with the wedding, every quiet little warning she had been feeding each of us, and there was one name sitting in the middle of every single piece of it. She had been telling me he was cheating and telling him I was leaving, trying to crack us apart from both sides so she could be standing right there in the gap when we finally broke. So Theo and I made a decision. We did not say one word to her about it. We let her keep believing her plan was working. I started telling Renee that I had been thinking hard about everything she said, that things with Theo felt shaky, that I honestly did not know if Saturday was going to happen at all. I let her watch me look worried and tired. Meanwhile, Theo and I quietly called every single vendor ourselves and confirmed every last detail behind her back so that nothing she touched could break anymore. And I kept her as my maid of honor. I smiled at her. I hugged her. I thanked her for always looking out for me. I had stopped thinking of her as my friend somewhere in all of that, but I made very sure she never felt the difference because I wanted her close for what was coming. The shakier I let the wedding look, the bolder she got. The night before the wedding, we had a small dinner for the wedding party and our closest family. Renee walked in glowing. She thought she had already won. She had brought her boyfriend Jesse, who had been with her for 3 years. Halfway through dinner, she pulled Theo up out of his seat and toward the back room, telling the table she needed his help carrying something. I let her take him. From the hallway, I could hear plenty. She told Theo that I clearly was not ready, that I had been pulling away for weeks, that he deserved a woman who actually wanted him, that she had always been the one who truly saw him, and that the two of them could stop pretending now. And then she made her move, put her arms up around his neck, and kissed him. Theo stepped back and took her wrists off of him and said, in a very even voice, I know exactly what you have been doing. She told me weeks ago. Every text, every story about her cheating, all of it. We are getting married tomorrow. Renee just stood there with her hands still in the air. Then she heard the glass break behind her. Jesse had come into the back room to find her, a drink in each hand, and he had been standing in the doorway long enough to see the whole thing. What Renee did not know was that I had already talked to Jesse earlier that week. I told him to watch her closely at the dinner. He thought I was being paranoid. He was not thinking that anymore. Jesse looked at Renee, then at Theo, then back at Renee. There was no anger on his face. It was something worse than anger. It was understanding. Like a puzzle he had been working on for 3 years just clicked together all at once and the picture was ugly. He set his remaining glass down on the counter very slowly and said, 3 years? And you were just waiting for someone better to come along? His voice was so flat it barely sounded like a question. Renee grabbed his arm and the tears came on like someone had flipped a switch. She said it meant nothing, that she got confused, that she loved him, that she did not know what came over her. Jesse pulled his arm free and said, I just watched you kiss him and tell him to stop pretending. That was not confusion. That was a plan. And then he turned around and walked straight out the front door without saying goodbye to a single person at that table. The door closed and it was not a slam, just a click. Somehow that was worse. Renee stood alone in the back room for maybe 2 minutes. I could hear her breathing from where I was standing. She wiped her face, fixed her hair, took one long breath, and then walked right back out to the dinner table and sat down like nothing had happened. She told the table that Jesse had gotten upset over a silly misunderstanding, that he gets like this sometimes and just needs space. Within 5 minutes she was smiling, pouring herself more wine, asking someone's aunt about her garden. The table moved on. Nobody pushed back, because Renee has always been the one people believe first. When Renee tells you a story, you just nod, because it is easier than questioning her. I got up and walked into the hallway. Theo came around the corner, reached down, and took my hand. He reminded me that we had every single text she had ever sent him saved on his phone, every lie dated and time-stamped, and that the florist, the caterer, and the seamstress had all confirmed the calls came from Renee's actual number, because she never thought anyone would check. He said, she cannot talk her way out of screenshots. He was right. I looked at him and said, tomorrow. We do it tomorrow. In front of everyone. He nodded. He did not smile. This was the end of a friendship that had lasted 20 years, and we both knew that no matter how right we were, it was still going to hurt. But Renee had made her choices every time she picked up the phone to call a vendor, every time she whispered another lie about Theo, every time she looked me in the eye and said she was just trying to protect me. She had 20 years of chances to be a real friend, and she spent them all building a trap. We walked back to the dinner table together. Renee looked up and smiled and said, there you two are. I was about to send a search party. I smiled right back and said, just needed some air. Big day tomorrow. Renee raised her glass and said, the biggest. She had no idea. I woke up the morning of my wedding to 17 missed calls, all from Renee. The first voicemails were breezy. The Renee everyone knows, sounding like she was smiling even through the phone. By the fourth, her voice had tightened and she said, I really think you need to talk to me before you do anything today. The last one, sent at 6 in the morning, had no warmth left at all. She said, I am telling you right now, do not go through with this without hearing me out first. That was not a friend checking in. That was someone who had sensed the ground shifting and was scrambling to get to the story first. I put my phone down and did not call her back. 2 hours before the ceremony, I was in the bridal suite with my dress hanging on the door when Renee walked in like she owned the room. She pulled me aside, leaned in close, and told me she had gotten a call from Jesse that morning. She said Jesse was angry, that he was going to reach out to Theo and tell him something about my past that would end everything. She grabbed both of my hands and said, you need to let me handle this. I can talk to Jesse and make it go away. There it was, the exact same play she had been running for months, wrapped in a brand new package. Manufacture a crisis, make me scared, make me need her, swoop in and save the day. I knew none of it was real. Jesse had not called her. Jesse was not threatening anything. I made my eyes go a little wide, squeezed her hands back and said, "Okay, do whatever you think is best." The relief that washed over Renee's face was something I will never forget. She nodded like a doctor taking charge of the treatment and walked out looking like she had just pulled me back from the edge of a cliff. The door closed and I called Jesse. He picked up on the second ring, voice flat and tired. He said, "I have not talked to Renee since last night and I am not planning to." "What is she telling people?" I told him. He went quiet, then said, "She is lying. I blocked her number at 2 in the morning. She is making this up." His voice did not even sound surprised. It sounded like someone who had just gotten one more piece of proof for something he had already figured out. He asked if there was anything he could do. I told him to come to the wedding, that he deserved to see who Renee really was, not just in a back room with nobody watching, but in front of everyone. He said, "Yeah, I think I need to see that." 30 minutes later, Renee came back into the bridal suite glowing, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "I handled it. Jesse is not going to be a problem." She tilted her head and added, "See, this is why you need me. Nobody else would do this for you." I smiled and said thank you, and she sat down and started working on my hair. When my phone buzzed on the table, I glanced down. It was Theo. His text said, "Renee just texted me from a new number. She said you were crying all morning and asking if it was too late to cancel." I did not respond. "We good?" I stared at that text for a few seconds. Renee was standing right behind me, one hand in my hair, the other reaching for a bobby pin, humming, relaxed, totally at ease, and she had found a new number and texted my future husband a lie about me while she was supposedly out saving my wedding from Jesse. Still doing it, even now. I picked up my phone and texted back one word, perfect. I set the phone face down on the table. Renee finished the last pin in my hair and stepped back and said, "You look amazing." I stood up, took my dress off the hanger, stepped into it, zipped it up, and looked at myself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, because the seamstress had done her final fitting exactly the way we had arranged it, not the way Renee had tried to cancel it. The flowers downstairs were the full arrangement, not the downgrade Renee had called in. The caterer was set for the right date. The DJ had the full reception on his schedule. Every single thing Renee had tried to break, we had fixed. And in less than 2 hours, every person sitting in those chairs was going to hear all of it. I looked at myself in that mirror, in my wedding dress, with my hair done by the woman who had spent months trying to destroy everything I was about to walk into, and I was not nervous, not even a little. The ceremony began, and it was perfect. Every vendor was on time, every detail was exactly what I had ordered, and the look on Renee's face when the florist carried in the full original arrangement, not the smaller one she had switched it to, was the first crack. She blinked at the flowers and looked around like she was trying to figure out what happened. During the ceremony, Renee stood beside me holding my bouquet, and I could feel her watching Theo the entire time. Theo's vows included a line about how the people who tried to pull us apart only pushed us closer together. He did not look at Renee when he said it. He did not have to. At the reception, Jesse walked in. Renee saw him from across the room and her face went white. She had not expected him to come. She walked over fast and I watched her whisper something sharp to him. Jesse did not whisper back. He said, loud enough for the people at the nearest table to hear, "I am here because I was invited. Sit down." Renee sat. For the first time all day, she looked like she did not have a plan. When the reception host announced it was time for the maid of honor speech, I looked at Theo across the table. He gave me one small nod. Everything was in place. Renee walked up to the microphone and the whole room got quiet. She looked confident, like someone who had been practicing this speech in front of her bathroom mirror for a month. For about 10 seconds, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the caterer getting a call to change our date, the seamstress getting a call to cancel my fitting, the text to Theo at midnight telling him I did not want him, the kiss in the back room with her arms around his neck, the fake emergency she made up that very morning from a man who had blocked her number hours before. The pity went away fast. Renee's speech was about us at 12 years old. She talked about the day we met, how I was sitting alone at lunch and she came over and shared her chips. She talked about sleepovers and bad haircuts in her parents' bathroom and getting lost at the county fair and wandering the livestock area for 40 minutes because neither of us wanted to admit we had no idea where we were. Her voice cracked at exactly the right moment. She dabbed her eyes with a napkin and the whole room leaned in. My own mother was pressing a tissue to her face. Then Renee turned and looked right at me, her eyes shining, and said, "You are the sister I chose, and I would do anything for you. Anything." The room applauded. People were standing. I pushed my chair back and stood up. The room settled. I picked up my glass and said, "I want to say something about my maid of honor." Renee put her hand over her heart and tilted her head to the side. I said, "Renee told you she would do anything for me, and I used to believe that. I believed it for 20 years. Renee's smile dropped just enough that I could see it. I said, "So let me tell you what anything actually looked like." The room was dead silent. I said, "Every single problem with this wedding was traced back to one phone number. The caterer got a call moving our date. The seamstress got a call canceling my final fitting. The florist got a call downgrading my flowers. The DJ got a call cutting the reception short. Every single call came from the same number." I stopped and looked right at her. Renee's number. The room shifted like a temperature change. Renee let out a quick bright laugh and said, "That is insane. Why would I do that?" Her eyes were doing math, already trying to figure out how much I had and how fast she needed to move. I said, "Because every time something went wrong, you were the one who fixed it. And every time you fixed it, you made sure everyone knew I could not handle my own wedding without you." The laugh did not come back. I said, "Renee told me privately, more than once, that Theo was cheating on me. She said someone had seen him with another woman. She told me I should call off the wedding." A few murmurs moved through the room. Renee stood up and said, "I was trying to protect you. I heard a rumor and I told you because that is what friends do." Her voice had that wounded noble quality she pulls out when she wants you to feel bad for questioning her. I nodded at her, let her see me nod, and then said, "Okay, then let me tell you what she was saying to Theo at the same time." I looked at Theo. He was already on his feet. He pulled out his phone and started reading. The first text was from 3 months ago. Renee telling Theo that I had been acting different lately, and that maybe he should talk to someone about it, meaning her. The second text was from 2 weeks later. Renee saying I had told her I was not sure about the wedding, that I had been crying, that she thought I might be getting ready to leave. That was a lie. I never said any of those things. The third text made the room go completely still. Renee asking Theo to meet her alone, telling him she knew things about me that he did not, and wanted to help him understand what was really going on. Each text was dated. Each was read aloud in Theo's calm, steady voice. Faces around the room went from confused to something harder. People were looking at Renee and then looking away. Renee stood with both hands flat on the table and said, "Those are taken out of context," but her voice had lost every bit of polish. It came out thin and fast. I said, "Last night at the rehearsal dinner, Renee pulled my fiancé into the back room. She told him I did not want him. She told him she had always been the one who truly saw him, and then she kissed him." The gasp from the room was real. Not one person, but several, all at once, cutting through the air sharp enough to feel. Renee's face went red, deep, and fast. She started to say something, but I held up my hand and said, "I am not done." I looked toward the back of the room until I found Jesse 3 tables back, sitting with his arms crossed and his jaw set. I said, "Jesse, Renee's boyfriend of 3 years, walked into that back room and saw it happen. That is why he left last night." Every head in the room turned. Jesse sat still for a second. Then he nodded, once, slow and heavy. He said, "I saw the whole thing. She had her arms around his neck. It was not a misunderstanding." His voice was flat and tired, but it carried across the room because nobody else was making a sound. Renee looked at Jessie, and I watched everything leave her face. The confidence, the charm, the quick-thinking sharpness that had gotten her out of every corner she had ever been backed into. All of it gone. She whispered, "You were not supposed to be here." That was when the room broke open. People started talking over each other, sharp whispers and loud questions. Then my mother stood up, pushed her chair back, pointed at Renee, and her voice cut through everything else in that room. She said, "You were in my house last week telling me you were worried about my daughter's mental health. Was that a lie too?" Renee's face crumbled. The tears came, but these were not the tools she had been using all week. These were real and messy and ugly. Her voice came out broken and she said, "You do not understand. I have been here since the beginning. I have given everything to this friendship." I stepped around the table and walked right up to her, close enough that what I said next was just for us. I kept my voice low and said, "You were not there for me. You were there for you. You wanted my life. You wanted my fiancé. And when you could not have them, you tried to blow it all up so nobody could." There was nothing left on her face. No spin, no play, no angle. Just a woman standing in the middle of a room full of people who had all just seen through her at the same time. She grabbed her purse off the back of her chair. She turned and walked toward the door, and nobody stopped her. Nobody followed her. Nobody called her name. Jesse did not look at her as she passed his table. He kept his eyes straight ahead and let her walk by like she was a stranger. She got to the doorway and turned around one last time, and I could see it on her face. The urge to say something. One final version of the story that put her back in control. But the room was silent, and every face was turned toward her with the same look, and whatever she was going to say just died. Her mouth closed. She turned around and she walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I turned back to the room. I lifted my glass. My hands were not shaking anymore. I said, "Now, I would like to make a toast to my husband." The room cheered. Theo was on his feet before I finished the sentence, smiling at me like I was the only person in the building. The music started. The lights came up warm and gold over the dance floor, and Theo came to me and took my hand, and we danced. Under the lights I picked, and beside the full flower arrangements I ordered, and inside the timeline I planned, in the dress that fit perfectly, because the seamstress finished it exactly the way we had arranged it. Every person in that room was there because they loved us honestly, and the one person who never did had walked herself right out the door. Renee's chair sat empty for the rest of the night. Her place setting stayed untouched, her glass still half full from the toast she gave before mine. Nobody mentioned her name again, not once. Not during the cake, not during the last dance, not when the night ended and people hugged us goodbye and told us they loved us. She had spent 20 years placing herself at the center of every room. That night, the room simply moved on without her.